What's up? How you doing? Here we are. Beautiful night tonight. Beautiful night. It's a little bit cooler than it's been the past few days, but it's nice. Nice, comfortable, relaxing. And I'm reading a nice book here. If you can read that. It's a little bright. I don't know. There we go. So, Lost on a Mountain in Maine. And it says now a major motion picture. I don't know. I've never seen that. I don't know what's going on. But I was reading this, enjoying the book, and then my younger daughter, or my younger, she came up to me and she said, "That looks like a kid's book." I go, "This is not a kid's book. This is for grown-ups, adult people reading this." Even has a nice map inside. Right, so I'm reading this, enjoying it, and then she turns it over here and she goes, "What is this?" And I go, what is it?" And fine print down here, it says ages 8 to 12. But it's a good book, regardless of who it's for. And I think that's a typo. So I have some tea here. Today it's Lipton. That's delicious. I love Lipton tea. Oh man, that's good. So I think that's LAPD. I don't know where they're going, but I hear them. Let them fly overhead. That's them. So I was thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger today. And I'm a fan of his, but I was a huge fan years ago. In the 8th grade, I even did a book report on him. It was called An Education of a Bodybuilder. Douglas Kent, I think, was the real author. Arnold was the guy that gave the stories. And I bought that book probably, I don't know, 6th grade, right? And I read it a few times. And so my teacher said, "Oh, we're going to do a book report." And I said, "Oh, we get to pick our book." She goes, "Well, you can pick your own book, but you have to bring it in so I can authorize it." I guess she didn't want, a book for 4-year-olds, right? So I brought it in, had Arnold on the cover posing on one of these mountains out here. And I said, "I'd like to do a report on Arnold." And she goes, flips through it. She goes, "Oh yeah." She goes, "That's a, acceptable book." And I said, "Good." I'm thinking I already read this, but I read it again actually for the book report. You forget details. And big fan of his. I loved that book. So I read it, and then I wrote my book report. I handed it in and did okay on that. And I used to read Muscle and Fitness in the old days by Joe Weider. I don't know, some people would say Wider. It's not, it's Weider. I don't know where they get Wider, because he was into bodybuilding. That was a play on the name, Wider. But no, his name is Weider. Joe Weider and his brother Ben. So that was a big moment when the new magazine of Muscle and Fitness would come out. Go to the store, pick it up, nice flashy, pictures, nutrition in there, how to, get muscular, how to do this, how to do that. It was all repeats, basically. Every month was a repeat of maybe a year ago, because there's only so many things you could write about. There's only so many exercises. And when Arnold came out with The Education of a Bodybuilder, he talked about workout. He's got a little workout section in the back, but then he came out with something even more definitive. It's the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding or something like that, and he's got everything in there. So if you buy that book, you don't need to buy any other magazine. It's all in there. But anyway, I would get that, read a few articles here and there. Clarence Bass. I don't know if you remember Clarence Bass. Clarence Bass was one of my favorite articles to read. It was in the back, and it was always like somebody would send him a question or two, and then he would respond by writing a whole page or column, whatever it was. And Clarence Bass was a twig. You know, it looked like he weighed about, I don't know, 70 pounds, very muscular, had like 2% body fat or something extremely low. And then every vein in his body was like visible. And I think he's still alive right now. As I speak, I think he's still alive, although I haven't checked in quite a while, but I think I would have heard something. Clarence Bass. I think he lived in, or he probably still lives there, New Mexico, Albuquerque. So anyway, Tom Platz. Frank Zane was my all-time favorite. He had just the right amount of size, nothing, monsterish looking like today's bodybuilders, where they look ridiculous, like they're bigger than the planet. So I liked Frank Zane. Tom Platz, that guy, very motivated, had the legs, they were like tree trunks, big legs. For those days, those legs were, even for today, those legs are big, but for those days, they were huge. Never won the Mr. Olympia. He came close one year, I remember, and he should have won it. He should have won it. Tom Platz, he looked all polished, had the blonde hair, still around, very energized. Kind of reminds me of Mel Gibson when he's angry. Who else was Franco Columbo? He was known for his strength. I remember there was a show called Kids Are People too. It was on Sunday mornings. It was kind of like a new thing back then. Michael Young, I think was his name. I actually ran into him one time at the Grove. I saw him there. He was coming out of Apple, the store. And he kind of looked the same to me. So I saw Franco Columbo there. First time I ever saw him, I go, who is this guy? And then Al Beckles, another Johnny Fuller. I think he was Jamaican. Amazing shape, and one of the best ones of all time, Robbie Robinson. I don't think it's Robertson, it's Robinson, right? What do they call him, the Black Prince or something like that? He's still around, still works out at Venice Beach. You go up there at Gold's Gym, you'll see him. I think he's almost 80, or at least mid-70s. He had, like Frank Zane, the perfect, symmetry. And he still looks, for his age, he looks amazing. Frank Zane, not so much. Frank Zane lost, I don't know what happened, but he's not what he once was, and he's in his 80s, so what do you expect? How can you maintain that into your 80s? It's very difficult. You can't. It's impossible. Forget about difficult. But that, Lou Ferrigno obviously was another big name back then. Trying to think of that guy, Dickerson. What was his first name? I want to say Dick Dickerson, but that would be too much. Anyway, he won in the 80s, early 80s, the Mr. Olympia contest, and he's, in my opinion, he's one of those that shouldn't have won it. I don't know, I didn't find him appealing enough to win that title. But Frank Zane, when he won, I said that's a good choice. And he had Zane Heaven, Palm Springs. You'd go there, it was like a little resort. Doesn't have that anymore. Now he's down in San Diego. Still has something though. Frank Zane. That was a cool name. It reminded me of like the Wonder Twins or something. Getting back to Arnold though. So I actually ran into Arnold when that movie Junior came out. And I was walking downtown where the library is, downtown LA, and I could hear somebody talking a heavy accent, but I was looking, to the ground, minding my business and walking, and there were two guys, and I look up and I see it's Arnold, and he's talking about Mercedes this, Mercedes that, with some other guy there. and he was really good shape. He had nice dress pants, dress shirt on. Kind of looked like a Perry Ellis, but I'm not really sure. And then these two kids, teenagers, they ran from the street towards Arnold, and then security jumped out of nowhere. Can't get any of them. Security jumped out of nowhere, and they said, he's not doing that today. No autographs. So I wasn't gonna ask for an autograph. I don't really do that. I've never done that unless it's like a concert or we have backstage pass or something like that. But generally, I don't do that. Put him on the spot. Anyway, so I passed right by him, and I got a good look, and I said, "Wow, looks good for his age." And he looks good for any age, actually, back then. So went in the library, did my thing, and they were promoting the movie that day down there. Now, what I'm going to say about him is not controversial, but this is one of the luckiest people on the planet. This is a guy, yes, great bodybuilder, 1971, those years, amazing shape, 74, 75, but 71, amazing shape, but no talent for acting. Let's be realistic now, I mean, we're not talking about personality or anything like that. We're talking about just talent for acting. Zero talent. I don't know, a very lucky guy that he made it into movies. How that guy made it. There are people that can act, and they end up doing these small roles, or they do commercials or some small stuff, and nobody really takes them in and says, hey, we'll make you like the star of this movie. But he owes it all to James Cameron. James Cameron, man, if that guy didn't come along, Arnold would have faded. That would have been the end of him. Like the 80s, he would have done B movies, maybe in Italy somewhere. But James Cameron gave him a huge break. Wrote the movie Terminator, and he needed something big, an actor big, had that, that walk, and not much dialogue, right? He had a few, lines, catchphrases, I'll be back, all that stuff. And that made him a star. After that, the roles kept coming, and it was always these, tough guy roles. It was like roles that Stallone could have done. That style. But as far as the acting, I mean, Stallone can act. There's a bunch of years where Stallone was doing some ridiculous asinine acting, like that movie Oscar, horrible acting. Rocky V, horrible acting. Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, asinine acting. I don't know why he went into that over animated, talking thing like he did. So first of all, in Rocky V, you're supposed to be suffering from brain damage. I know later on they reversed it and said it was a misdiagnosis, but back then when he wrote that movie, Rocky Balboa was supposed to be suffering from head trauma. I don't know where Stallone got the idea that talking faster will indicate that he has brain damage. He was talking fast, he was, whatever. It was ridiculous. Awful movie. I'm glad he came back and did Rocky Balboa. Kind of saved himself a bit there, because I think Rocky V put a nail in his coffin. They probably said, okay, we're done with this guy now. He had a good, decade, 15-year run there, but he's done. And he was doing all these ridiculous movies. But anyway, Arnold, his acting is awful. So the other night, me, my bride, my daughters, we sat down and we watched The Running Man, the movie. So when it first came out, back in the 80s, right, I went to see it. I was exhausted that day. I really physically exhausted. So me and a friend of mine said, let's go see a movie. And we did. And we saw maybe 18 minutes of it, and we fell asleep. We were knocked out. And occasionally we'd open up our eyes and we said, oh, we're still here, the movie's still going on. So I never saw that movie again after that. It was that 18-20 minutes that I saw initially, and then that was the end of it. So the other night we're like, all right, let's watch it, let's see what's going on. I'll watch an Arnold movie. So put it on, start watching it, and it made me realize even more than before what an awful awful actor he is, you know, and how lucky he got. Showed you like determination is even more than talent. Got lucky with that James Cameron movie, you know, sequels to it afterwards, because he wouldn't do sequels for a while. He was like, I'm not doing it. Like, you're that good that you don't have to depend on sequels. But yeah, lousy. Some of the expressions on his face are just ridiculous. You know, like it's overacting. It's not realistic. I don't know. Somebody should have said, you know, here's a funny line. In the movie Terminator, Arnold wanted to say, I will be back. He goes, it's kind of weird for me to say, oh, I'll be back. So he wanted to do I will be back. And then he went up to Cameron, and Cameron said to him, you know, he goes, you're doing I'll be back. Don't tell me how to write. I don't tell you how to act. And I'm thinking, that's a funny line. You know, if he actually said that to him. I don't tell you how to act. Maybe you should have. Although that movie for Arnold was perfect. Very little talking, a lot of physical stuff. Looks good in the role, you know. Part 2 was awesome, even better than part 1. And you know, whatever. But he just got lucky, you know. I mean, very few people without talent make hundreds of millions of dollars in acting, in movies. And he just doesn't have that natural, you know, ability to create the illusion that what he's doing is real. You know, it looks like, you're looking at him, you're like, okay, that's not good acting. You know, but anyway, he got lucky. But, you know, like I said, a big fan of his. Determination is a scale of 1 to 100. He's like a 180. Determination. Like, what did he do in life? Bodybuilder, top of the game in his time. He was the top guy. Won Mr. Olympia 7 times. 6 times legitimately. The other one 7. In 1980 was very iffy. Mr. Universe, which I think no longer exists. I don't think they have Mr. Universe anymore. Although I prefer the title Mr. Universe. You know. You know, he did a lot of, you know, the acting, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, billions. His movies have made billions worldwide. Then he became a governor. Just crazy. I mean, all the stuff he did. And the thing that's funny is no acting talent at all. And that's what he chose to do. I guess he was watching things in Munich or Germany, wherever he was living, and he said, that's what I got to do. I got to be an actor. Had that idol, Reg Park. Reg Park was his idol, and yeah, interesting life. Not a fan of Maria Shriver. I don't hate her. I'm just not a fan of hers. You know, I remember those funny cartoons with Arnold getting a phone call from Sly, and he would say, "Arnold, can you come out and play?" And he's like, "Oh, let me ask Maria," and then Maria would be like, hey, you know, give him a lecture a little bit. Those were funny cartoons. Whoever came up with those. But I did see him, and I have seen Stallone. I've mentioned this. I've seen Stallone several times now. There was a time when I would say, I wish I'd bump into him somewhere. And then I actually did. I bumped into him one time. He was coming out of a Pilates place. And at first I thought it was somebody who looked like him. Because years ago, there was a guy in my neighborhood who looked like Rocky from Rocky 3. He just adopted that look. The haircut, you know, everything. And I would see him and I go, this guy thinks he's Rocky. Short, like the real Stallone is. And I would look at him, and I remember one time I was in the supermarket shopping, and I happened to be right behind him in the checkout line there. And he was there with his girlfriend or something. You know, he was older than me by maybe 15 years. And I was looking at him, and I go, this guy, to me, looks like he's doing a parody of Rocky from Rocky 3. Just funny. So, I thought it was a look-alike, and then I looked again. I go, oh, that's him. And then I went to the auction where they were auctioning off all the stuff from all his movies. Apparently, he had a deal that if he made a movie, at the end of the movie, he would take all the stuff. So I was there, and he was there, and I stood right next to him. Like, I was literally, like, maybe just far apart from him, and he was talking and everything. And then I ran into Chuck Zito there. Chuck Zito, awesome guy. Very friendly. I went up to him for a picture. He was like, yeah, sure. He was like very accommodating, very nice guy. Frank Stallone was there. I ran into him twice. Frank Stallone was there. He was very nice. He was doing all shadow boxing, telling stories. And I talked to him for a little bit, took a picture with him. And then years later, I was at the car wash out in Century City. Gave my car, and I was waiting there, and then I see this Bronco pull in, blue Bronco. And if Frank's watching this, you know I'm telling the truth, because it's a blue Bronco, and he has a vanity plate. I'm not going to say what it is, but if you see the number, you'll know exactly what. Anyway, so he's coming out of the truck, and he drops his iPhone, and he picks it up. He's all pissed off. He grabs it, and then he comes towards me, and I said, how you doing, Frank? I said, yeah. And he's like, I'm good or something. He went into the place to pay, but he was pissed off that he dropped the phone, and probably pissed off that somebody knew who he was. So I saw him there, and then Stallone I saw again at that Pilates place, but this time he was in his car, and he didn't do any eye contact. He was like just doing this. Because I was looking right at him, and he could tell. You could tell somebody's looking at you from the side, but he was just doing that, and I didn't wave or anything. And then I saw him another time at a gas station in that area. He was in his, it was like an SUV or something. He was making a call, and I was getting gas. I wanted to take a picture of him, but I didn't. It was just way too obvious, so I didn't do that. But the time when I went to the auction, I was just waiting for the right moment to take a picture with him, because other people were doing it. They were going, yeah, he's like, yeah, sure, they're taking pictures, right? And I go, I don't want to bother him, I don't want to bother him, I don't want to bother him. And then he turns around and he goes, and he gave a wave, and I said, he's gone. And I didn't get a picture. So the auction was a 2-day event, so I said, you know what, I'm here tomorrow, I'll just ask him then. So I went the next day. Frank was there, Chuck Zito was there, a bunch of the other guys, they were all there. I sat in one of the seats, but he wasn't there, so I didn't get the autograph. Not the autograph, the picture. I don't care about the autograph, just wanted a little picture. But, he can act, Stallone can act. If you don't think he can act, Rambo. First Blood, the ending scene, the one where he's telling that story, Colonel Trotman, that's good acting. Another example is Rocky, the original Rocky. Mickey goes up to his apartment and he wants to ask him if he could be his manager. That whole sequence, that whole scene, from beginning to end, until he leaves, and then he chases him, not chases him, but he goes and finds him in the street and gives him a hug and everything. I'm talking about Rocky to Mickey. That whole scene is great acting. That is great acting. Arnold could never, ever, 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 I don't care how much acting lessons he receives, can't do that scene. So Stallone can act. It's just that, like I mentioned earlier, he went into this phase where somebody said, you got to do more animated acting, jumpy. And so he ended up doing that kind of clown acting, and I think that hurt the career. And then he went back to okay acting again, but I think Arnold is a better actor now. He's lost a lot of that sound that he used to make, and he's a better actor now compared to what he was back in the 80s. But man, he was making a lot of movies back then. People were taking chances. It was the name. So, but yeah, I used to read a lot of his stuff. He always made it like seem, when I was growing up, my idols, I would write them and they wouldn't respond, and it would upset him and all that. And I said, you know what, he sounds like a guy that if I wrote him a letter, he would respond. So one day, I was in like 6th grade or something, I wrote him a letter. Sat there with my hand, wrote the letter out, signed it at the bottom with the sincerely stuff, folded it up nice and, you know, firm, put it in an envelope, got an address of his agent, and I mailed it. And I thought I was going to get a response. Nothing. I go, this guy's all talk. He was, in his book, he was saying how much, you know, he wanted his idols to respond, you know, he would write and whatever, and when I did it, he didn't respond to me. So I know they get millions of things like that. They can't respond. I understand that, believe me. But would have been cool if he did, right? Trying to think, just to mention a couple of who else was a big Menzer Brothers, heavy duty training. Those are the guys where they train like once, twice a week, but extra heavy. And they were, you know, good size. Then they both died, like near each other. Like, you know, one died one day, and then a few days later or something, the other one died. Frank Zane, though. Frank Zane was, he was on an episode of Heart to Heart. And you can tell, you know, when somebody's in great shape, even though they're wearing a suit, they have that look. I don't know, like some kind of walk they do. Now I watched that funny guy, the Anatoly. That's not his real name, but he's a thin guy. You know, he's muscular, but he's a thin, muscular guy. And he pretends he's a janitor, and then you can watch him on YouTube, walks around the gym. And then it'll be like these really bulky guys. Their arms are like out here somewhere. They're huge, you know, 250, 300 pounds, and they're doing deadlifts. And then he comes around, and he's got this mop that weighs like, I don't know what it weighs, like 60 something, 70 pounds, whatever. And he's pushing it along like it weighs 10 pounds or 5 pounds. And then he hands it to them, and they're like, you know, pulls them forward, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, what's the matter? So he's like, can I lift this or whatever? And they're like, you? And they do that sarcastic giggle, like, yeah, you're gonna lift that? And he's like, how long would I have to train to lift that? And they're like, yeah, probably 4 years. So he gets down there and lifts it up, and they're all amazed. Their eyes open up. They're like, oh, how did you do that? So he's got that. And then recently, there's a video of him meeting Arnold, and Arnold's talking to him and everything. But it's a funny, you know, I don't know how long he could keep doing that now and getting views, because everybody knows who he is. He's got to change the whole disguise. But even that, you know, if you see somebody coming in and they could lift 600 pounds on the deadlift, then you know it's probably him. But it's a, you know, clever thing. I remember years ago, though, there was a show, Real People, and they went to some gym, and there was a really skinny guy in there, like sticks, really skinny. And they showed him, he was amazing, because even though he was a twig, really thin, he was able to do, I think he was doing squats in that scene, but he was able to lift more weight than all the other guys who were big and bulky and muscular. So, fast twitch muscle. It's good to have a little of both, fast and slow twitch. You don't want to be super strong, but sluggish. Have no endurance, you know. And then on the other hand, you don't want to be a weakling and have a lot of endurance, be able to run far and all that, but then somebody pushes you with the finger and you fall over. You know, it's good to have a little bit of a balance. And I would say endurance should always beat out strength. Strength is a good thing to have, but you want it to be a 60-40 split. Endurance can get you through a lot. You know, I remember in the gym, the big bulky guys, you know, they were strong, but they'd move, you know, a little bit from here to there, and they'd be breathing heavy. You know, so you want to have the endurance. Yeah. Anyway, I may be back, I may be not. And I may make some more tea. Who knows? That's it for now. Ciao.